sight words are your students learning every week? Whether they're beginners or struggling, how many words do you think they're learning in a given week? I have tonight a shortcut for you. It's a rereading routine that will most likely double or triple the number of words your students can learn in 1 week. How does that sound? So I'm going to talk about the importance of 3 stages of rereading. But once they have read a new text with the teacher, then what do I recommend? Okay, first of all, they read a text that matches the word work that they're studying, at least for a period of time at the beginning when they're either beginners or they're strugglers and they're working out the decoding system. Match the text to the word work. So if they're targeting short A and short I, find a text that has a lot of short A and short I sounds in it. And short A and short I words. If they're targeting the O sound, find texts that target the O sound. When you have that alignment, you'll get the transfer. And particularly if you're going to be rereading these texts, the transfer will be more likely to happen. Not only transfer of the letter sounds, transfer of the high frequency words, but also as well. Then, this is what we talked about last week. I recommend that the students take turns reading aloud this new text with the teacher's coaching. So yes, there's a moment when one child's getting all the attention and the others are expected to be following along, but the teacher can set that environment up in such a way where the student's eyes are on text and she's watching them. So she's giving coachings to help the one student decode and get better with his word identification strategies, but she's also making sure that eyes are on print and everyone's being held accountable to follow along. And then after that first read, the second step is that the teacher models a slow but expressive read aloud. And again, she's watching everybody's eyes. Are they watching print as she's reading? It's a second exposure to all those words for those kiddos. All right. Then if there's time in the lesson, you might be able to squeeze in a third reading even in this small group session. Maybe in 20 minutes, towards the end of the lesson, you may be able to do all this. And if you can't get the third reading in, maybe you can get the third reading of a sentence or two or a paragraph. So in that third reading, perhaps all of the students will read chorally, or maybe they read a passage chorally and then a student reads a sentence. Just to quickly squeeze it in, get another douse of the eyes on print time, give them that boost so that when they go off to the centers, they're better equipped for attacking anything they can't remember. And so that is the routine for stage 1. Okay. So stage 2 is when the students are at literacy centers, then they reread the passage until it's mastered. That may take one kid 1 or 2 more times. It may take another kid 5 or 7 times, and sometimes even the 10th time. Some kids with some learning challenges may not be able to master it, but we can adjust things, don't worry. But the goal is that they are going out on their own or with partners or with some sort of digital device, and they're getting enough repetition so that they master that text. So they reread the passage that they just did for guided reading or for small group instruction with a teacher. They also, if there's time, reread other passages. So say they're working on short A and short I all week. All week they should be getting a new passage that has practice with short A and short I. Or maybe one day it's short A and one day it's short I. And say it's Thursday. And so they should reread the new text for today until they've got it really good. And then they also go back and read Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday's passages. So look at what's happening to their sight word vocabulary. Remember at that my opening promise, if you were here, was how many words are they actually learning in 1 week? Well, what if they were to reread a new passage every day and they mastered it? How many words in the passages might they start to have memorized? That's stage 2. So it's super important that they do the text once with the teacher, including the modeling, maybe even 3 times. And then the second stage is just as important. They doesn't stop with the teacher. They've got to go out into the crowd, into their centers, and reread it. Of course, that is a managerial challenge. I am not denying that. But if you can orchestrate your classroom and your incentives and your motivation and your organization in such a way where this happens, you will see the numbers of words get stuck in kids' head skyrocketing. So how do you make it feasible? How do you make them actually be successful if they're really struggling with the text? Or how do you make it motivational? Well, you kind of need to play detective and try a lot of different activities. And what may work for this child or this group may not work for this child or that group. For instance, some kids panic when I say, I'm going to time you, see if you beat your time yesterday. And other kids are like, yeah, I'm going to win, you know. And you just never know until you kind of broach the topic and see what they think. So try these different strategies and give kids options, particularly when you notice that they react negatively or really positively. So the number one way that I would probably be doing this a lot of times was just have kids, a group go out, work in pairs, and they would buddy read. So maybe one kid doesn't know this word, but maybe the other one does, especially with the first component of this routine. If that's too hard for certain students, then pair them a strong reader with a weaker reader, and then you would have heterogeneous centers. The other way that really reduces the burden on the student and increases motivation is to have them listen along, either on a CD or an iPod or some sort of tablet or a computer. For instance, Starfall, they can listen and see the text, or if they can't figure out a word, they can click on just that one word. So that's super helpful, particularly for the motivationally challenged or for those who just have so much work to get through the text that's necessary. Even better, if you have a teaching assistant, have them there for that time when the rereading opportunities are supposed to be happening, because if they can listen and give more feedback and give them corrections, bravo, that's super important. Or maybe a volunteer or an older student if you have fifth graders coming into your class. Awesome. Let's jump in now to that third component. The secret here is the next day, you want them to come to you having almost mastered it, sounding fluent. And I encourage my kids, I want you to read this, practice this so much so that you sound just as good as your big sister, or you sound just as good as our principal might sound reading it. And of course, they don't all get to that stage, but if they get from completely disfluent to really close to being fluent, then you have gotten some serious success, because all those words that they saw in the text are much more likely to be not only learned in the context of that text, they're likely to be transferred into other texts. So the accountability of the literacy centers really kicks in the following day. Did you reread it enough to be able to perform it for the rest of the group? So when you start the next small group reading session, let me hear your passages, and you just lay them out because you've also got a copy, maybe in page protectors. And everybody reads it quarterly, and you're watching their eyes to see who's really stumbling along or not really keeping up. And maybe you say, that was super. I would love to hear if there's any volunteers. And then just give the individual here and there a chance to reread it again. That can take very little time as far as your small group instruction, but it's a great assessment and it's a great form of accountability. So that is where that's where the success comes in. The next day, are they good? Are they fluent? If so, the routines and the management that you have kicked into place the previous day are working, and that's what will boost their word identification rapidly. They don't just get better at decoding and word identification and fluency. They also get better at comprehension. This is from a 2014 reading research synthesis. So they took lots of different federally funded clinical trial studies in the U.S., and they found that fluency interventions that focus on repeated reading of texts, opportunities to practice reading in the classroom, and reading a range of texts can generally improve students' fluency and comprehension. So comprehension's our end game, right? But this work that we're doing to improve their sound-based decoding and then reread so they build up their word identification, It's all for the end goal of being better at comprehension. And so it does work, just because it may feel like it's distal or distant from comprehension in that you're just focused on the words. It really isn't, particularly if you're in the context of a literacy-rich classroom and you make sure that you ask them what the passage was about that they were just reading. So don't let this rereading make you feel that you're not doing something to lead them towards comprehension, because reading research has shown that it yields comprehension outcomes.